I spent 24 hours in Stardew Valley. This was all streamed live at twitch.tv/redtmxd, so go follow me if you want to. Anyways, without further ado, please like, subscribe, and enjoy the video. At the start of hour 1, after completing the normal clearing of space and planting some parsnip seeds, I really wanted to create a solid foundation to build on for the rest of the 24 hours. So I planted some bean seeds from Pierre and got to work collecting some mixed seeds for some extra crops, which would substantially boost the crops that I could buy in the near future. While I was doing that, I decided to create some goals for me to complete, and my final list was this: complete the community center with remix bundles, reach the bottom of the mines, and get 1 million gold in total earnings. With that out of the way, I grabbed my fishing rod from Willy and spent most of my remaining hour fishing. To switch things up a little, I changed the fishing catching noise, which turned out to be incredibly goofy. I also got a dinosaur egg from a treasure chest on the 3rd day of spring. I ended out my first hour in Stardew Valley by rambling about some random screen shake.
Oh, did you see how the screen moved right there? Is this a goofy ass Stardew Valley epic bug 2022 working? Free Robux?
Planting 46 potato seeds from Pierre and adopting my new cat, Nob. The first thing I did on hour 2 was water my potatoes and head over to the mines, as they had just been unlocked. I managed to get all the way down to level 10 in 1 day, and thanks to the remixed mine rewards, walked away with a literal femur. The next day, I went over to Gunter to donate a fossil, which in return, he graciously gave me 9 cauliflower seeds, which I planted. I then headed over to the wizards to chug some lean, before once again heading to the mines with the goal of reaching level 20. And by 12:30, I had made it, not bothering to collect the reward, but simply running home as fast as I could. I spent the following day collecting up some copper for Clint's billboard request, before cashing out. I then ended out the second hour by checking out the newly opened community center and seeing the remix bundles that I would have to complete. I started out hour 3 by purchasing a chair from Robin, which I used to commit some suspicious activities, and grabbed myself access to the secret woods and all of the forageables within it. I picked them all, then fished there for a while before heading back to the mines, where I somehow got an ancient seed drop from a random bug, and got even luckier when a forest saw dropped from a barrel. I then collected my level 30 reward. Absolutely nothing. The next morning was the big day that my potatoes were finished growing, and I even had one drop almost 10 potatoes, which I was absolutely ecstatic about. I then headed into town where I gave Jody a flower, collected my ancient seed from Gunter, and even made it to level 40 in the mines, where I got the incredible, overpowered weapon, the slingshot. The following day, I decided that I wanted a coop, so I spent some time deforesting public land before realizing that I needed a silo to store my hay before I got one, or else my chickens would starve. But there was only one problem: I didn't have enough clay. Luckily for me, I knew the ancient method of clay farming, the only way to get hundreds of clay in a single day. I was ready, but I had no energy, so I guess it had to wait till tomorrow. I started out hour 4 by doing some clay farming on the beach, and walking away with a solid 25, easily enough for me to build up a silo. So that's exactly what I did, placing it down next to my house. I then visited the Adventurers Guild before spending some time in the mines and heading into the Egg Festival the next day, determined to thrash the children. So I bought a bunch of strawberry seeds, picked a bunch of eggs, and triumphantly walked away with my straw hat. I spent that entire night planting and watering my new seeds. The following day, I finished a bundle in the community center, looked through some others that I had unlocked, then fished in the river for a bit before donating them as well. I spent some time chopping trees the following morning, and when I had enough, I headed up to Robin's and ordered a new coop for my farm. I spent the rest of hour 4 foraging for salmon berries all around the map, grabbing Robin's lost axe and watering my strawberries. On hour 5, I began by donating a couple of fish to the community center, then heading over to Clint's to order an upgrade for my pickaxe. I spent the next 20 minutes or so fishing in both the river in town and the ocean, before confronting Linus for digging through trash on my walk home. The next morning was a great morning since my coop had finished construction and was fully ready to house some chickens, which I bought from money. I then spent some time down in the mines trying to get both a solid amount of iron to craft some future items and get down to level 50, where unfortunately my reward was simply a worse sword than the one that I was already using. I went home, and the following morning I spent some time watering my strawberries and ancient fruit before collecting a bunch of cave-related items from my chests to donate to the boiler room in the community center, where I somehow managed to get every single bundle in the room to be only missing one item until completion. I spent the small remainder of the hour talking to my viewers about why the lost axe is still called the lost axe, even if I found it. The first thing I did during hour 6 was chop some trees, then head over to Robin's with the initial thought of giving her axe back. But then I just didn't. I don't know why. Instead, I decided to head over to the mines and reach level 60, where my new burglar's shank was waiting for me. I knew instantly that I would never use it. The next morning, I wooded my crops and tended to my now fully grown egg-laying potential chickens before heading to the boiler room and completing one of the bundles. I also noticed that I had an abundance of geodes, so I picked them up and headed over to Clint's, who kindly opened them all. I donated all of my minerals and artifacts to Gunter, who in return gave me some seeds and a standing geode. I spent the rest of the day in the mines digging to level 70 and absolutely molding about how annoying ghosts are. Like how they take so much knockback and they go through walls and they deal decent damage, so they're impossible to kill. I did manage to reach level 70 that day, collecting my well-earned slingshot. I also attended the flower dance the following day, then proceeded to spend the rest of hour 6 deforesting both the forest, the bus station, and my own farm, with the goal of getting enough wood to purchase a big coop. Demetrius greeted me on the first morning of hour 7, offering to fill the cave on my farm, so I chose mushrooms before going up to Robin's and ordering a new big coop for my farm. I then realized that I needed a gold bar to complete the boiler room, so I headed to the mines, got a bone sword from killing a skeleton, and reached level 80, collecting my dark boots. Now that I could easily collect gold ore, I left immediately and headed to bed. But the next morning I headed straight to the mines and spent the day collecting gold ore, which I went home and smelted up. While I was waiting for it to smelt, I went fishing in the lake on my farm, which mostly yielded trash, which made me worried about how Grandpa really treated it. That night, after my gold had finished its smelting, I walked to the community center and donated the bar, completing the boiler room, getting me 1/5 of the way to full completion. The morning of the next day was the day that my big coop that I had been saving for was completed, so I wandered down to Marnie's, who amazingly was actually at her store. Miracles do exist, I guess. After buying some ducks, I checked the traveling cart before buying a bunch of blueberry seeds from Pierre and planting them when I got home. I also planted the seeds that Gunter had given me and spent the final minutes of hour 7 chopping trees and clearing my farm. At the beginning of hour 8, I was on the beach, once again trying my best to do some clay farming. Strangely, it wasn't working anywhere near as good as last time, so I gave up and went home with only 6 clay. But when I was walking up to Linus's tent, I noticed that the way to the railway was no longer blocked, so I now had full access to the bathhouse. Since I was already in the area, I decided to go over to the mines and cleared level 90, getting myself the obsidian edge. Very happy with myself, I went home and sold all of my mayonnaise and mushrooms that I had gotten from the mines. The next morning, I decided that it was finally time for me to upgrade my fishing rod, so I went down to Willie's, made the purchase, and excitedly fished for the entire day. By nightfall, I had made some donations to the community center and headed home, but I wasn't finished with my donations quite yet. The following morning, I grabbed all of my donatable items from my chests and donated them all. I then proceeded to spend the final time left in hour 8 fishing in the ocean with my new rod, mostly catching for money and fishing XP, since I had already donated all of the summer ocean fish that I could. I started at hour 9 night fishing in the ocean, before going to sleep and watering my plants the following morning. I then headed over to Robin's to check the price and needed resources to build up a barn, and spending some time chopping all the trees surrounding the carpenter's residence. I returned home and once again got straight to work chopping, as I needed a lot of wood to buy my barn. When I was finished with that, I headed to the mines not to get further down, but to farm stone, and by almost midnight I had collected the 150 stone needed, so I went to bed happy with my progress. And the very next morning, after watering my crops, donating some items, and clearing my mushroom cave, I walked to Robin's and bought a new barn. I then wandered to Clint's, where I ordered an upgrade for my axe, and stopped by at the traveling cart, where I made the stupid purchase of some seeds that I didn't need at all. And this purchase also meant that I could no longer get the iridium rod, but instead had to bear with fishing with my fiberglass rod until I could sell enough fish to afford it. Absolutely disgusting. Luckily for me, even before midday could roll around, I had made the purchase, leaving me completely broke, but with an iridium rod in my hand, I made the money back in no time. I spent the rest of the hour, in fact, fishing to dig myself out of crippling debt.
In the beginning
of hour 10, I visited the secret woods, then headed straight to the mines with the one goal of reaching level 100. And by not even 11 PM, I had made it and enjoyed my hard-earned very first star drop. The next day, I went over to Clint and collected my brand new copper axe, as well as donated a bunch of of gems and random artifacts to Gunter. I also went up to Robin's and debated on whether to buy a house upgrade, but eventually decided against it, and returned home to chop trees for some time, as I needed a bunch to upgrade my barn. The following day was the luau, and after planting some trees to start a tree farm, I headed down to the beach and threw in a duck egg. It was very normal. When I returned to my farm, I was excited to see that the dinosaur egg that I had gotten on the 3rd day of spring had finally hatched into a little baby lizard, which was very exciting. I also walked down to Marnie's, where I bought 4 new cows, checked out the traveling cart's goods, and spent the rest of the hour deforesting public land and selling mayonnaise. So unfortunately, I lost the footage for hour 11, but I have all of this other footage, so I'm gonna try my best to splice it up and like make it at least look decent, so like it kind of looks like what I'm doing, what I'm saying in the script. So yeah, subscribe, enjoy. I'll be back normal in hour 12. Okay, thank you, subscribe, bye. Hour 11 started with me giving a tomato to the community center. I then spent the next entire day collecting both wood from my farm and stone from the mines in an attempt to obtain the needed resources for the construction of a big barn. And before midday, I had ordered the upgrade, leaving me penniless. But I still donated my crops, and on the same day managed to complete the summer crops bundle, rewarding me with a free sprinkler. The day after, I decided that my mission was to reach level 110 in the mines and collect the very last randomized reward that I would ever get. So I was very excited. I mined my way down and eventually made it, collecting my new level 8 sword, which was substantially better than my obsidian edge. I also went over to the community center, then was heading down to Marnie's to buy a sheep when I ran across her walking away from her store. Luckily, my depression was soon cured when I got the notification notifying me that a train was indeed passing through Stardew Valley. So I sprinted up and hoped for some good loot, and my prayers were answered when the train just seemed to go on infinitely, dropping me some decent loot for a locomotive. And I walked away very happy with the event. I ended at hour 11 with some fishing in the mountain lake near Robin's, and some night fishing in the river through town, which was very relaxing. At the start of hour 12, I had a look through some of the remixed bundles, and I noticed I needed 10 milk for the home cook bundle. I was very upset. The first thing I did was once again chop all the wood on my farm, as I needed it to get a deluxe barn, but also to repair the bridge on the beach, so I could have permanent access to all of the forageables on the other side. The following day, I headed over to the mines with the simple goal of completing one of my main objectives, get to the bottom of the mines. Luckily for me, I had just incredible luck, and by 8 PM, I had made it and collected my well-earned skull key. Proud of my efforts, I headed to bed, and the next morning I bought 100 wheat seeds from Pierre, as I needed them to complete the home cooks bundle. I then donated some other items that I had laying around and opened a bunch of geodes at Clint's before finally deciding that it was time to plant the wheat. After they were in the ground, I smelted up some ores, and the next day I placed down the sprinklers, then wandered down to Marnie's to buy myself some goats to fill my big barn. I ended at the hour by going to Robin's without any intention of buying goods, but to simply scoff at prices and be generally annoyed by the amount of chopping that I would have to do. I also sold a child. Yeah. Hour 13 begun with me at the beach, fishing so that I could afford a deluxe barn. I fished for a solid 10 minutes, then returned home, making almost 4 grand that night from fish alone. I donated some animal products the next morning and gave a spoon to Gunter before first checking the traveling cart and the beach for any forageables that I could sell. Since I was already at the beach, I decided that it was a great time to once again fish for the entire day. So that's exactly what I did, making 7 grand in profit that night. The following day, seeing as I had the money required to buy the deluxe barn already earned, I spent the day chopping wood on my farm, then heading up to the mines where I farmed stone. Amazingly, by nightfall, I had all the materials needed, but sadly, Robin had closed her store by that time, so I would have to wait until tomorrow. As soon as tomorrow rolled around, I tended to my animals, then ran over to the carpenters, just in time to see Robin leaving her store. This was devastating. I swallowed my pain for the rest of the hour by hitting trees with my axe. Hour 14 begun on a high note, as I completed the construction bundle in the community center. I had a look at the other items that I was missing, then returned home. The following day was a day that would change the course of the video forever. I had just realized that I needed 3 apples to complete the community center. Apple trees only produce in fall, which wasn't a problem since I was at the very end of summer. The problem was that apple trees take an entire season to grow, and I didn't have one. I thought at the time, if I planted one on the 24th of summer, it would grow in time plan to produce 3 apples by the start of winter. But the 24th is a Wednesday, and Pierre is closed on Wednesdays. At this point, I had no idea what I was going to do, so I just went up and bought my Deluxe barn, hoping for a miracle. When the next morning rolled around, I ran straight to Pierre's, purchasing my apple sapling and planting it in the ground. I also noticed that my wheat was ready for harvest, so I got out my scythe and harvested it all. Keep in mind, the bundle requested 100 wheat flour, not wheat, so I would have to build up a mill to craft it. The next morning, I went over to Marnie's and bought a sheep, so that I could get wool to construct a mill. With only 10 minutes left in the hour, I decided that I wanted to get started creating tappers for all of my trees growing in my tree farm. So I wandered up to the mines and grinded for copper for the remaining time. Hour 15 started at the Dance of the Moonlight Jellies, where, oh my god, is that the rare green jellyfish that is super rare and definitely doesn't come every... The next day was the very first day of fall, so after tending to my animals, I re-hoed all of the ground before heading to Pierre's to buy 85 cranberry seeds, which I planted alongside the other vegetables that I needed for the community center. That night was very special, as it was the night that Pam gave birth to a baby cow. This must be canon. I then spent the rest of the day running around Cindersap Forest, looking for wild plums. You might be wondering, wild plums? Yes, I need 20 wild plums to complete one of the remixed bundles in the community center. And I had all of fall, so it should be fine, right? Well, not really. 6 is the hard limit for forageable items per map per week. With 3 other forageable items to compete with, only 4 spawn resets in total, and the beach and desert both being ruled out, this becomes a bit of a problem. Mathematically, it's completely possible to get 20 wild plums in this time. Sadly, it becomes difficult when you actually need to find them. Back on track, after foraging for the entire day and only finding blackberries and common mushrooms, I decided to instead head down to the depths of the mines to attempt the lava eel. Now, this fish is difficult. So difficult, in fact, that it is known to be the hardest fish in the game. Not because of its difficulty, but the stupidly low chance of hooking the thing. I caught 3 trash, 3 broken CDs, 4 driftwood, 4 Joja Cola, 3 broken glasses, and 5 soggy newspapers before I even hooked it once. Luckily, I did end up catching it, but why is there soggy newspaper in a literal pond of lava? Explain. The 16th hour began with me donating the lava eel, then once again wandering all around the map in search of wild plums. The next day, I headed down to Marnie's and bought a new pair of shears, since my new sheep had grown into an adult and I needed them to collect my wool. Once I sheared my sheep, I went over to the community center and finished a bundle before once again walking down to the beach to do some fishing using my iridium rod. I fished for quite a while since I wasn't gonna leave until I caught an eel. Luckily, by 6:30 I had hooked one, so I went up to the mountain lake to catch the last fish that I needed for the night fishing bundle, a walleye. Since walleye only spawn after 12 AM, I spent some time chopping some trees and looking for wild plums, and before long it was time to fish. And I fished until past 1 AM, since I kept catching midnight carp, but eventually I did hook the walleye, unfortunately too late to make it home on time. When the next morning rolled around, I bought all of the fish to donate to the community center, completing both the crab pot bundle and the night fishing bundle. I then fished down at the lake with Willy for an entire day, mostly catching a bunch of tiger trout and salmon, which I sold. For the remainder of hour 16, I ran all around the map looking for wild plums. Emily greeted me at the beginning of hour 17, notifying me that her sewing machine was now available for me to use. I then gave Abigail a quartz for a billboard quest before running around the entire map once again, looking for any wild plums that I could have missed. When I returned home that night, my cranberries that I had planted at the beginning of fall were ready for harvest, so I picked them all and threw them in the shipping bin, knowing that I would make bank that night. The following day, I crafted up a mayonnaise machine and a cheese press before heading right up to Marnie's to purchase a pig for both profit and truffles for the community center. I also went into the secret woods to collect some forage. When the next day came around, I decided it was about time for a house upgrade, so I chopped all of the trees on my farm and all of the trees not on my farm and all the hardwood not on my farm, and returned home that night with over 450 wood, which I used the next day to order a kitchen for my home. I fished at some bubbles at the mountain lake for a while, then visited the traveling cart, hoping with all of my might that an apple would be in stock. It wasn't. I spent the rest of hour 17 fishing at some bubbles in Cindersap Forest, then donating some loose items to the community center. I harvested my cranberries in the introduction of hour 18, before heading up and completing the 4 crops bundle in the community center. I then headed up to the railroad to clear the area of debris, before descending into the mines to grind stone. I headed home with around 100 stone and a bunch of other garbage that I had managed to procure. The next morning, I noticed that I had enough money to buy myself 2 new pigs, so I went down to Marnie's and did exactly that. Back on the farm, I made some mayonnaise, then picked up a rare wild plum near Robin's and checked the traveling cart for an apple, before once again chopping a bunch of trees since I needed wood to construct a mill. And that's precisely what I did the next day, placing my new mill to the left of my barn. I then headed up to the railroad as I got a message saying a train was passing through, but it unfortunately dropped nothing at all. Disappointed, I spent some time relaxing in the bathhouse, then searching once again for any wild plums that I could have missed. At this point, I was getting a little desperate. Luckily for me, I could wind down since the next day was the Stardew Valley Festival. I picked all of my highest quality goods and headed in with confidence, nailing the strength meter and setting up my display, which to my amazement managed to secure the first place position, scoring me 1,000 star tokens. So I did what anyone would do with their riches. I gambled every single penny and lost. It took quite a while, but I did eventually manage to sell at the store, which in my eyes is a win at the Stardew Valley Festival. I stared at my apple tree to begin hour 19, then walked around the entire map again for the sole purpose of finding wild plums, and I found nothing at all. The 2 items that I needed the most for the community center could have spawned with the bat cave, but I'd stupidly chosen mushrooms. Oh well, at least I had food. The next morning, I collected some wheat flour from my mill, then headed down and checked the traveling cart for either an apple or a wild plum, before scouring the map once again and donating my wheat flour to the community center, as well as finishing the entire pantry, fixing the greenhouse on my farm. The next day, I was trying to milk my cows, but Cartito kept getting in the way every single time. So many times, in fact, that someone watching suggested making a steak out of Cartito. Later on, I planted and watered some new ancient seeds in my greenhouse, then spent the rest of the hour hopelessly looking around the map for wild plums, since it was the 23rd of fall and I still had a lot to find. Hour 20 was a grand hour. It started out with me harvesting all of my cranberries, then finding another wild plum near the mountain lake. A couple of speedrun days later, 2 amazing things happened. I was super lucky with the wild plum spawns, and my apple tree miraculously grew faster than I was expecting, securing 3 apples by the end of fall. These 2 events were critical for the community center completion, so I was very happy with this fact. And even more amazingly, the same day that I had found the final wild plum that I needed, one showed up in the traveling cart. I bought it purely out of spite. But my anger wasn't for long, as Spirit's Eve was tomorrow. I spent the entire day waiting for the event to begin and chopping trees, walking away with an amazing 800, which would surely last me a very long time. Spirit's Eve finally began, and I finished the maze easily, collecting my prize of the golden pumpkin. I quickly returned home, and the very next day headed over to the community center, my inventory filled up with items that I could donate. After giving everything I had, I decided it was time to complete the vault room, so I bought all of the bundles and unlocked the bus to the desert. On my way to Marnie's, I got a bread from a bin, and when I arrived, I spent over 50,000 gold on 2 heaters and 2 auto collectors, which I placed in my newly upgraded Deluxe coop and my barn when I arrived on my farm. Hour 21 was slightly uneventful. Since it was the first day of winter, I began by clearing out my tree farm of seeds and saplings, then grabbed my magnifying glass from the shadowy figure. I then headed to the desert to catch a scorpion carp, grinded for stone in the mines to order a brand new barn for my farm, and all the while slowly collected all of the winter forage. When I finally got the only forage I was missing, the winter root, I decided it was about time to complete the community center. So I headed over, completed the fish tank, then the bulletin board, then finally the crafts room. The community center was complete. I headed home incredibly triumphantly, planted my winter seeds, then got back to chopping trees on my farm. The next morning, I headed down to the secret woods to give the bear some maple syrup, and ended at the hour by grinding hardwood and crafting up some mayonnaise machines and cheese presses. Hour 22 started with me doing some casual deforestation after dark. I then realized that I needed a bunch of stone to upgrade my new barn to a big barn, and eventually a deluxe barn, so I got grinding. Midway through, I was disturbed by the townsfolk celebrating my hard work, so I went to the quarry and blew it up using dangerous explosives. And this turned out to be a massive play when it came to stone collection. A little after that was the ice fishing festival, where I was more interested in talking to the wizard than doing some actual fishing. I won, by the way. Just saying. I then realized that I also needed wood to be able to upgrade my barn. So I chopped all the trees on my farm, the backwoods, and the quarry, and just managed to get the amount that I wanted. I also decided it was about time I got my golden scythe, so I completed the cave and grabbed my beautiful prize. I finished out the hour by heading over to Robin's with all of my hard-earned resources and ordering a brand new deluxe barn for my farm. On hour 23, the first thing I did was head over to Marnie's and buy some goats to live in my new deluxe barn. I then grabbed the frozen tier for Sebastian's birthday, but I forgot he never leaves his room. Luckily, I managed to catch him on the way to the kitchen and gave him my frozen tier. I then sat in his chair and actually got kicked out of it when Sebastian came down to work. The following day, I had made a bunch of money, so I ran over to Marnie's, who was miraculously actually at her store, and bought a bunch more goats to live in my barn, since I decided that I would dedicate the rest of these 24 hours to making as much money as possible. This was because I had already completed my other two objectives, but at this point I'd barely made 400,000, so 1 million was a little out of the question. Nonetheless, I would still try my hardest to earn some cash. And finally, the next morning I bought 4 final goats to fill the barn, officially getting me a deluxe barn filled to the brim with 12 goats. This would make me a lot of money. I then ordered an upgrade for my pickaxe at Clint's and fished at the river flowing through the town, before giving a coffee to Harvey for his birthday. I chopped a bunch of trees in the last 15 minutes of the hour before heading down to the night market and watching a man's head pop up at the exact time of opening. I ended at the hour watching the mermaid show and collecting my pearl. I started the final hour in these 24 hours chopping large stones on my farm with my new iron pickaxe, then crafting up 2 more cheese presses. I then headed down to the wizards and handed him a void essence. I mostly spent the entire hour just tending to my animals and selling cheese and mayonnaise that I got before expanding my ancient seed farm in my greenhouse. After a while, all of my goats were fully grown, and I purchased them another auto collector. So my barn was fully completed, and tending to them became a whole lot easier. On the 21st of winter, I decided that it was a great opportunity to give Caroline the pumpkin she had asked for to make a jack-o'-lantern for Halloween. So I did. She seemed very pleased. I then completed a bunch of journal quests for all kinds of people before coming home once again and patting all of my goats. For the final 5 minutes of the 24 hours, I gave Leah a cheese for her birthday and had fed all of my animals because I had to buy hay as the timer finished. Also, all of these hours led up to me spelling 24 hours is up wrong, by the way, just to let you know. To finish up these 24 hours on a high note, I decided to play one final day just to enjoy the Feast of the Winter Star. I gave Sam a pizza for his present and received a wine, which was fine, I guess. I finished the stream by placing my tree down on my farm, symbolizing the end of a great experience. Thank you all so much for watching. Also, if you've made it this far, comment your best joke in the comments and I might laugh. If you enjoyed, make sure you're subscribed and also follow me on Twitch. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed and I'll see you when I see you, I guess. Bye bye.